hear us yet.
All right,
Are we
I
back?
think that is on. All right, looks like we're on again. Third time's a charm. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we're going to try again, and it is what it is. If they yank me again,
Head on over to D Live.
it's just going to be D Live Crow 777 Radio, all one word, okay? If you want to be part of this, we're going to keep it going on D Live like we have been the whole time. It's Crow 777, CRROW 777 Radio, all one word. That is the D Live channel. So
All right.
Let me see if this is all running properly again, because it doesn't like it when you do stuff like this. All right, looks like D Live is up. Hello again, D Live, and all you wonderful bears over there. Rawr. All right.
Roar.
This has been grisly, right?
That was bad.
I know.
All
The
right,
jokes aren't going to get any better. Not up to this point. Okay, so we
right.
want to pick up where we left off? All right, so let's see. I think we got cut off where I was trying to explain the interconnectedness of all things, and that we have this dichotomy between Scripture saying that divination is bad, don't do it, but there's specific divination practiced by both the high priest and amongst the priests generally within the Torah. So there's a little bit of a juxtaposition there. But when it comes to looking at these sorts of things, whether it's the tarot or I Ching or any of these things, my perspective on it is that it comes about as a result of this interconnectedness of all things, and that whether you want to call that the luminiferous ether or whether you just the collective consciousness, however it works.
Slow down
right?
a little bit. Slow down.
Okay. I was just trying to recap and get all this back. So, it could be a result of, magnetic stuff and how, whatever the cause, it does seem that much like when you try to look behind a veil, my experience is that it's a bit like looking through glass bricks, right? You can sense that there's perhaps motion there. If it's light, you might be able to sense that there's a person or two people there, but you can't see very clearly. And under different conditions, if it's nighttime, it's more difficult. But a person who becomes trained and accustomed to reading these things might be able to get a bit of insight into what's going on simply by the way these interconnectedness of all things. And now here's the problem, I think, right, is that when you begin to look to these sources rather than the creator as the source, then you open the door, many people do, to influences that are less than good, right? We'll say malevolent. Well, we can even say demons or what have you, dark forces that can begin to influence these things. And so if your primary goal is simply information, if you're just trying to look for information, and if that's your, let's say, your living, right? You read the tea leaves, then you're going to be looking for that information irrespective of its source. And that's where I think some of the problem can come. And if people, again, worship the creation rather than the creator, that's where the problem is. I don't necessarily think that that the interconnectedness of all things, as was created by the Creator, is necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, he used these sorts of tools like the ephod, and the high priest used that, or casting of the lots. They used these sorts of things in the context that they were instructed to by the Creator. And so I think that, yes, while these things can be and often have been a tool of those who may be influenced the wrong way, I think that, like most things, in and of itself, it's a tool, and how you use that tool. So is a gun bad? Well, it's a tool. It can be a life-saving tool, or it can, it can take life. So it has largely to do with intent. And I think this is true with many things. For example, the sky clock, as Crow describes. We get into astrology these days, and most people, from a Christian perspective, would say that astrology is misleading. And yet, it was put into place by the Creator. And he said right there in Genesis, right, that these should be for signs and for seasons. So specifically signs. And the Magi that came and visited Jesus when he was born, they had been watching the stars, and Abraham was an astrologer. So these things, again, largely deal with context and intention. And so simply calling somebody out and saying that they're demonic or worshiping Satan for having any interaction at all with the sky clock or symbols or any of those things, I think is a misjudgment. And I think from my perspective, if you're going to follow Scripture, it specifically says, don't judge your brother on those things. It's not your business how the Creator leads somebody else, right? And if they're exhibiting love, then that's an exhibition who they are. And I know Jason personally, and I've never met more loving people than he and Rose. And so and I've certainly met people who claim to be Christians who are assholes. So to that end, again, I just say you know them by their fruit. And if the fruit is darkness, then take it for that. And if the fruit is light, take it for that.
You know, if I could jump in here and I'll say this. Now that was very, very well stated. I'll say this. You know, over the years doing this with Truth on YouTube, and the reality is this: the majority of people, a lot of people on YouTube, there's a good amount of shills on YouTube. So the problem is, everybody is under a microscope. You know, myself. You know, I get people. This is, you know, I'm going to say it. There's people that I work with, and we get arguments. They wonder if I'm a Freemason or a shill, that type of thing. So, you know, during, you know, on Skype conversations, because they get upset about this or that, you know, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of that going on. But I think the main thing here is we're all being transparent, getting this all out there, and there's nothing to hide. And I say this is the best way to put it out there is don't trust anybody. Trust the information they provide. That's proven.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said over and over,
that.
don't listen to me. I mean, I would be very disappointed if people took my word for stuff, right? I mean, you're just exchanging one belief for another. At that point, you're taking somebody's word for it. Go look it up yourself and use discernment, for crying out loud.
Exactly. And here's the thing is, listen to everybody. Even the people that are, quote, shills, they have some good information. Take that. I said this horrible analogy, but it's like going to a buffet. Take what you like and leave the rest. You don't like the string beans, leave it there. Take what's good and just don't swallow everything someone says. You know, just watch everybody, listen to everybody, and have your own discernment, and you won't be deceived if you just use your own mind and with taking the information and process it properly. Then you'll be fine.
Wayne, I think it's your turn to chime in before I go off on a tangent.
All right.
Well, you want my soapbox?
Yeah, I'll take the soapbox for a minute.
All right, here you go, my friend.
So, okay. Anyway, yeah, there is a lot of this division within this quote-unquote truther community, and a lot of it does fall upon, you know, the more religious ideals per se. There are a lot of Christian truthers and stuff out there who tend to look at certain things and say, oh, that's bad, you know, and this is the whole Bobby Boucher's mother in The Waterboy kind of thing. That's the devil.
It's like,
You be playing the foosball, Bobby Boucher. That's the devil. And that's the kind of stance that they take on these things, just because they've never really looked into it. They just know one or two scriptures or something in the Bible that says, hey, don't do this. But they never take the time to look at it or, you know, study what the people who practice it believe and that kind of thing. And that's kind of, and this was tough for me, guys, okay, because I'm a born-again Christian, all right? I've been a Christian for a good long time now, and I've been, you know, through the indoctrination of the church and stuff like that with this stuff, and I had kind of this same stance for a while. But here's the thing, okay? The Holy Spirit called me in this direction, and if anybody who's out there who's religious, if you're a Christian, you know sometimes God calls you to do things that you're not so comfortable with doing. And I knew when I started like looking into this stuff that you know, it was going to be like one of those things that's really uncomfortable for me to do as a Christian, because it had been drilled into my brain over and over again. Oh, the occultism, that's evil, that's the devil, that's bad. You know, all of this stuff, this esoteric stuff, it's bad. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Be afraid of it. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. A Christian should have no part in that. Well, here's what I came to discover through time, okay? The only Christians that are fearful of that stuff are ones who have a very weak walk with God. And that is something that you need to know. So if your relationship with the Lord is that weak that you're afraid to look at information, to read something, that says something. I mean, that just shows indoctrination on your part.
Preach it, Brother Wayne.
And that's how I came to the understanding that religion is man-made dogma based upon these different ideas, like these different spiritual ideas. Like Christianity, the way Jesus laid it out, it's totally different than the way that it's portrayed by the organized church. Like seriously, there's you have to read it and interpret it yourself. So, and that's one of those things. I think we explored this on the show we did Sunday too, Baldini, where we had talked about how Jesus had actually said in the scripture, "In secret have I told you nothing." So there's no secret. They're, like the priests and stuff and the pastors at these churches, they don't know anything different than you do. So, like, why do they have the authority to tell you what to believe that this is telling you? And that's the thing. I mean, it's open for interpretation because it's been translated through so many different languages. And every time you read the Holy Bible, you'll find something new in there that you didn't pick up on before. Yep. And this is a personal thing, and this goes back to the personal relationship with God. So anybody who claims to be like a quote-unquote Christian truth or whatever, that's all well and good, and I believe their intention is good, and they want to live the most holy life they can. But sometimes you have to look at this stuff. If you want to understand who your enemy is, you want to know what he believes, what his tactics are, what his tools are that he uses. So it's not a bad thing to know about this stuff. And that's where Christians really drop the ball, because they're just, oh, don't look at that. Don't talk about that.
Agreed. I agree.
Run away. Yep, run away.
So,
yeah, I'll agree 100% with that, Wayne. You know, you hit the nail on the head there. When I dealt with a lot of this stuff, exposing a lot of these things, they're saying, why are you looking at that stuff? That stuff is evil. You shouldn't even be looking at that stuff. You're supposed to expose evil. Why not? I mean, that's just ridiculous that people would say that. And that becomes part of the programming. You go to the churches, they sing a lot of nice songs, they ask for your money, and then you got to go home type of thing, and water down a truth, biblical truth type of thing. So I agree 100% what you're saying, Wayne. Not to cut you off, but very well said.
No, that's fine. And yeah, I agree with you there. That is our mandate, and that's actually right in the Bible. We're to expose evil where we see it. And that's the thing. Just because you and I see it in more places than your standard average Christian would, because they're not really looking at it because they're afraid to go look at it, then, we need to bring these things into awareness. And that goes for anybody. I mean, even if you're not a Christian, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater here. There's a lot of value in the Bible and the scriptures, and there's so much truth. I mean, this encapsulates all of human experience in one book. When it comes down to it. So you could relate to so many different things in the Bible, even if you're not a Christian, and you could garner some truth out of there. And once again, this comes back to the whole thing where, the buffet analogy you made. Take what you want. You don't like it, throw the rest out or whatever. But don't lose the intrinsic value that's there just because you don't necessarily subscribe to what the church has tried to shove down your throat for years, because the organized church is a control system. No doubt about that. It's all man-made dogma that they push.
Wayne, I'll just jump in here real quickly and I'll say I take a different approach than a lot of people when it comes to believing. I show the evidence, and people are like, for example, flat Earth. You talk about the flat Earth and the evidence and how it matches the Bible. That will get people to look at the Bible and see it for themselves. Then they'll dig further. This is my kind of view on it. The more you push something on someone, the more they're going to push away. It's like if I invite someone over for dinner, and I put a plate of food in front of them. I say, "You better eat this." They're going to push it back. Like, why are you being so, forceful? Put a plate of food down. Say, hey, if you want to have this, if you want to sample it, that's fine. If you don't worry about it. They're more likely to try it, more likely to to give it a try. So that's the same thing when it comes to anything. You got to be, you got to think with your mind and not just be so forceful, and let people look at it themselves. And again, I think it's technique and how we approach things with people that's more successful. I truly believe pushing things, ramming things down people's throats is the wrong approach. We got to have a technique to how we do it.
Well, that almost never works.
RV, I agree, and I've often said that since this is a relationship, right? That nobody became a Christian or found their creator because they lost the argument. Right? That's just right. That's not the approach, right? It's it's by it is through your goodness, right? That your kindness is what brings you to is what brought me to him in the first place, and why I have a relationship with the Creator, because he is the definition of love. It's not a spiritual cop with a radar gun out to get you, right, and to toss you to hell. That's not the person that I've come to know. So I just really quickly, before we move on, I want to give a big shout out and happy birthday to Dawn, informally hip.
Yes, absolutely.
It's her birthday today. She's all over.
Happy birthday, Dawn.
She totally
Birthday.
is super supportive of all our channels, and she's an awesome person. So thank you, Dawn.
Absolutely is. Happy birthday, Don.
For
Happy to have you as always.
everything you do. And now, Jason, I know you've been wanting to jump in here. I can see you just sitting on the edge of your seat, wanting to jump in. So now that us Jesus people have had our moment,
Praise the Lord.
jalapeno.
Well,
throw down some gravy, Jesus.
That's right. So, I think anybody who knows me knows that I'm not a dedicated Christian. However, I pretty much do follow what you would call the Christian tenets. Which I boiled down to this, by the way, before I move on. Don't be an asshole. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Be cool.
Be thou not an asshole.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's how I am. I try to be cool to everybody. I'm
That's
super open-minded. I don't necessarily agree with everything everyone says, but I go by my own instincts and what feels right to me. And being super churchy and going to every Sunday and that kind of thing just doesn't feel right to me. I don't care if anyone else does it, whatever makes you happy. And this isn't even talking about like the whole organized religion aspect, which of course is a control mechanism. But as far as what your person's own personal spiritual beliefs are, hey, whatever works for you, I'm cool with it. Just don't hurt anyone else. That's the way I look at it. So that's my loose spiritual notion. Like, I'm very spiritual. I meditate. I feel like I can communicate with a higher power in the universe and all that, and that is what I do. I feel that there's something to it. I just don't anthropomorphize it. I don't put labels on things. That's just not the way I work. If something came down in front of me and said, hey, this is the way it actually is, I'd be like, oh, cool, well, that's nice to know. So that's that, and that's the way I look at it. Now,
and in the spirit of transparency, I mean, I can say, I used to actually be, in addition to being a worship leader, I was a teaching pastor at a church for a period of time. And, I will say that some of the people who seem most far away from a relationship with their Creator are those who grew up within the Christian church. They have a lot to unlearn, and it's very difficult. And as Crow often says, belief is the enemy of knowing. For some people, they simply cannot examine their beliefs and where they came from deeply enough to let them go to even find the truth of the Creator. It's I find some of those people are the furthest away, and it is sad.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like when RV asked me about tarot cards and things like that before, I don't give a shit about anything like that. I don't care. Again, I don't even think necessarily that divination is a horrible, evil thing. But I'll tell you one thing. I've seen a lot of spiritual stuff, and you better watch what you try and tap into, especially if you're weak-minded, because I've seen some pretty crazy stuff. I know that there's more to this universe than the physical, and that's why I am very careful. I'm also very strong-minded, so... Like, things can't take me over or affect me or things like that. Like, the one thing I learned, it's why I was good at martial arts, like anything like that, it's like you have to be very certain in your identity. And this actually really links into what Wayne was saying earlier about having your own personal relationship with God. Well, I do. I just don't label it the same way as very serious Christians do, where they have very strict names about, okay, this is what this is. This. I just don't do that. I don't have a problem with anybody who does, though. And that's that. Now... everything comes back to, in my opinion, intent. Intent is everything. No symbol is necessarily evil. I mean, they have evil connotations. People have done some bad things with it, for certain. But no symbol, no number, anything like that is necessarily evil. It's all about the intent behind it. Now, I'm going to take a moment to rehash a story that's been told a zillion times about my friend Crow 777, who is my co-host, and I'm his co-host. We've known each other for years. I've known him in person. He's a great dude. And guess what? He's not evil for using 777. Do you know why he uses 777? Let me tell you a quick story about the 1990s. A lot of people used really stupid monikers back in the 1990s. His is his name, his birth name, that each have 7 letters. CRR. That's as much as I'm going to say, because I'm certainly not going to tell anybody his real name, because you want to talk about a guy who's gotten a lot of crazy shit thrown at him, it's that man. And he doesn't deserve that. He's a good dude. But that's it. That's what CRROW777 is. And he likes taking pictures of crows. He thinks they're cool. He likes them. He thinks they're very smart birds. He's always wanted to have one to raise since he was a baby. So that's it. There's no bullshit Aleister Crowley stuff behind it. Like all this nonsense that people go off about. None of it. And why does Rose use it? Because she's part of our team. Rose is the third member of the Crow group. There's actually three
Jason,
of us.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in here, and I apologize, is I see, and I mentioned this in videos, about Aleister Crowley's book, 777, and other cultic writings. The 777 in Jewish gematria is order out of chaos. But again, it's about intent. Just like if someone's a farmer and they have goats, they have say some pet owls, in their home or in their barn or whatever. It doesn't mean they're demonic. And basically, you're giving the people. What I'm getting at is this: when we place a lot of emphasis on goats, or for example, black cats, so-called being evil, and I have a black cat, doesn't mean I'm a Satanist. and the thing is this, unfortunately, people kill these poor black cats, God's creations, because of the so-called, Illuminati or Halloween, this creation, and this nonsense over God's beautiful creation.
Right.
And this is again, I said this a million times, where these people have not created anything. This is God's creation, and all they can do is steal. And they're basically, you're giving these people power like it's theirs when they don't own it. They don't own it at all. They don't own any of it.
Right.
And I mean, evil does not create, by the way. Evil just twists.
It destroys.
And by the way, before I forget, there's something I'd like to say about Aleister Crowley while it's on my mind. If you look at what Aleister Crowley really was, and Crow and I did a whole show on him, the guy was a fucking loser that nobody wanted anything to do with. Even the bloody Freemasons didn't want his stigma of his nonsense attached to them. That's saying something. I mean, yeah, the guy did a lot of crazy esoteric shit. He probably was really smart, but he was a fucking weirdo who just wanted attention. He just happened to do it in a very twisted, bizarre way. That's not to say he wasn't doing anything. I think he was probably tapping into some serious bad juju. But in my opinion, looking through his whole life like we did, the guy was a loser. He was a wanker who wanted attention, and he got it. Anyway, Baldini, it's all you.
No, I was gonna, and I think that's been proven. He's been idolized after his, death and made into something that he
absolutely.
wasn't. But and again, I don't want to beat too hard on the Christian community, because again, clearly there's a lot of people, lovely people that I know who are in that community, and I love them very much. And I mean, again, I follow Jesus. So, but I will say that I have seen within the church community specifically, right? If you go and looking for a boogie under every bush, you're going to find one. And the same could be said about people who go looking for shills everywhere. If you think you're going to look for a shill that everybody's a shill, right? You're going to make them out to be that, and confirmation bias comes to you. And so everyone that, if you go looking for a thing, if you're looking for red cars, you're going to see a bunch of red cars. But especially when you're dealing with things in the spiritual domain, if you go looking for darkness, darkness will come to you. Right, and distract you from seeing the light. So again, I just always encourage good discernment, and you're never going to go wrong, by seeking out the Creator. I once had one of these very, very hardcore Christians ask me how I was doing, and I just said I'm pretty zen right now, and they got really upset and go, "Oh, that's from the devil," blah blah. And I'm like, "What?" I just meditate, and they're like, "Oh, meditate, that sounds horrible," right? And I'm like, "Okay." They're like, "When in the darkness, that's when the demons come," and I'm like, what is wrong with you? What happened to be still and know that I'm God, right? And that shut her up. Right. I mean, they often don't like it when you know the scripture better than they do. And again, I have a background in this. So I'm just saying, again, use good discernment. But whatever you go looking for, if that's your focus, that's what you're going to see. And I certainly see that many of us who are in this community that do a lot of research, it affects us by beholding you become changed. So when we see all this darkness and these pedophiles and this gross stuff happening, it's hard to look at it sometimes, right? And so you got to have a break, and I have to, back up a minute and make sure that I've got my foundation, and I'm looking toward beautiful things and to light to keep me away from the darkness. Just this is my heart, so it doesn't hurt so much. This is bad stuff we look at, guys, and there's a lot of bad people out there, and they want to do bad things. But there's a lot of good people out there too, and many of them in his community. And so we need to be, again, lifting each other up and encouraging one another. Again, not tearing each other down or getting into big fights because somebody doesn't believe the same things we do. If people get butthurt about Jason not going for mud flood, I mean, I think there's more there than Jason does, but we don't argue about it, right? I don't try to convince him because what's the point, right? I don't want to argue with him. I can't prove any of it. I just go, I think there's a there, but I don't think it's necessarily the narrative that's being told by some people, right? So again, Wayne and I, we both look at Christianity. We have different approaches about things, but we don't argue. I don't agree with everything that Crow says either, but we're good friends. I mean, I love these guys, right? And so I think it has much more to do with what we have in common and who our common enemy is than what we have separating us. And if we can keep in mind, again, if you know them by their fruit and look at what's happening in this community, you'll find the people who are stinky, right? And you'll find the people who are not. And so I stand by, Jason and Rose because they're not stinky. I mean, that's what I got to say. These four people that we're talking tonight, other than me, maybe I'm a little stinky. Don't put a trust in me because you'd be very disappointed. Find out I'm just a regular guy, right?
Yes,
I got all kinds of skeletons in my closet.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Baldini. But
no, go
when
ahead.
It comes down to it, we're just regular people. No one, again, we're being lied to on a grand scale, just trying to figure things out.
That's it. And, you just nailed it, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. And that's what it comes down to. And no one's beyond correction, myself included. I mean, I do research, and this is the problem with a lot of people. They're like, it's a lot of ego involved. They make claims, and they're very firm with it, and they're so sure of themselves. And once it's debunked, they're like still stuck on that because their ego won't let them come to the truth. So we have to be fluid when it comes to truth. With new information, it's okay to come to new conclusions, and that's very, very important. One thing I want to mention, because I go on for a bit too long at times, is one thing about Crowley I find interesting, though, because I touched upon him, that symbol that he uses, the multiple crosses pointing in different directions, 4 directions, it's a sign for Baphomet, and that's used currently by Grand Sovereign Commanders at the third degree. So some might say, they looked at Crowley as a crazy man. I'm sure there's some Masons that do. Other Masons look at him in a different way. It's just like people in truth, as we are, we have a different perspective. So a lot of people like to maybe group truthers as, you're a truther, so you must be a fan of David Icke, per se, as an example, or anybody.
Yeah.
And, we're all individuals. And if you're a Mason or non-Mason, we're going to have all different views. And the thing is this, we shouldn't let differences, because, again, no two people agree on everything. It's just impossible, as long as, again, we're on the same course of finding that truth and searching for truth, and that's the foundation of it all.
Right. Well, what you're talking about there, RV, is what I call box thinking. It's like, well, if you look at this, then you must be into this. Like you said, if someone's a truther, you must be into David Icke. The hell does that mean? No, I don't think everyone's a fucking lizard. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's where they strawman you.
Exactly.
You're one of those people. So you believe in Planet Draconia and aliens, and they love to like strawman people all the time. And basically, what it comes down to, a lot of people that are not involved with truth, they're just parrots. They're just parroting what they were taught in school, the mainstream media, history books, things that never been verified to them, and they just push it. And again, this whole world, the biggest issue in this world is ego. And there's people that have not looked into anything at all. And I've talked to people that are so sure about what they're told through in science or mainstream whatever, and I asked them, what have you questioned that the mainstream media has put out? And they give you a deer in headlights look. They don't know what to say because they've never done it. They never took the time to look at anything. They're just like, oh my gosh, I just saw this in the news.
Yeah, the parroting.
And they're just pushing it because I'm well informed because I watch CNN or I watch Fox News or whatever station they listen to. Them, that's research. Watching the news. Give me a break.
One of the biggest things that I want to get into whenever we're done with this part of it is the insanity that goes on even in the flat earth groups. I mean, that's just the shill calling, the insanity. And it's like, hey man, do you ever think that maybe that just see inconsistencies that you want to question? Like, I don't even call myself a dedicated flat earther. I say and I think this is about as intellectually honest as I can be about it, I see massive inconsistencies with things that I have done with my own eyes, mind you. My own equipment, I have used cameras, I have done things like this, and said, hey, I'm not sure if I should be able to see that. So I have questions and I have that I want answers to, and I think that is about as straightforward and honest as I can be. And I'm obviously cool with it enough that I gave a presentation at a Flat Earth conference, and I was told it was one of the best ones there, which was very flattering to me because I didn't think I was that good, but apparently they liked it, and that's great, and I'm happy about that. But this whole thing that we've been talking about, I really want to just get people to stop pointing fingers, stop shill calling. Like, I don't know anything about Patricia Steer very much, or Mark Sargent, or any of these people. Why do we have to say bad things about them? I mean, they all seem pretty nice to me.
Well, you know what? I'll just jump in here and say this. I've had, 4 or 5 podcasts with Patricia Steer, and I said, flatly, pun intended, look, I've never met Patricia. If for example, or Mark's, I said this to Mark too. I had him on a live stream podcast. I said, if Mark Sargent is a shill, or if I'm a shill, again, take the good information, leave the rest. I think what it comes down to is people just want to swallow all the information from one individual and not think. And again, take a little bit from everybody, and that's what it comes down to. And I think that the main issue is this: is we all grew up watching the news and parroting it at a certain extent. Age, and some broke away sooner than others. But the bottom line is people just get lazy and they just want to take information from someone else. And as researchers such as myself, I never do that. I'm always looking at information, trying to break it down. And a lot of people sitting back are waiting for that research and just regurgitate it. And we all need to do the research. And that's what it comes down to. Just don't sit and listen to a podcast and just like swallow everything. Just, if I say something, well, I got to verify what I say. If it can't be verified, I take it with a grain of salt. That's
well,
this is,
and RB brings up a really great point here, and I think this is, again, evidence that we have all been taught in the indoctrination centers to look at the source as authoritative, and then you can take everything they say as gospel. That's certainly not the truth, and in part, one of the reasons why I have kept pretty much my anonymity is because I didn't want people to look at the source and discount the information. I think the message is far more important than the messenger. And we can even look at this. For example, I've said many times that even controlled opposition, traps don't work without bait. And so even if we agree that, for example, Alex Jones is probably a controlled opposition with, being with Ted Turner and with that whole organization, nevertheless, about 90% of what he says is accurate. Now, he acts like an imbecile to make it, discount it, and so it's not credible. But that doesn't mean that some of what he's saying, in fact, much of what he's saying, isn't accurate. And this is where discernment comes in. And this is why I could continually say, don't trust me. Don't listen to it because I say it, right? All I'm doing is I'm going to bring it up and give you an opportunity to go look for yourself. And that's what I would hope people do. So if you look at the source as authoritative, and so many people want to put people up on a pedestal. I've seen this with Crow, for example, where people, they will follow and listen, and they like everything he says till he says something they don't like. And suddenly they hate it, right? Oh, he's a liar. It's like, well, no, he's not, just because he doesn't agree with you, right? What is that you have to get butthurt because he doesn't agree with your views, or, he's ignoring me, so he's not telling the truth. Right? He's afraid of it. Come on, people. Like, really, grow up. I mean, I don't want to be like that, but there are so many people who get they get so tied in and they want to idolize someone to give them all their information. And as RV says, when they're lazy, they just don't want to go out and research it themselves. And much of the stuff is out there. You just need good discernment and some discipline to go look for it.
Yeah, and a huge thing is, you could show someone the objective truth and they'll still deny it, because what happens is, if they admit that one piece of information you're showing is the truth, it's going to open up a can of worms. Now they got to do a reset and question everything. They can't go there.
Absolutely.
Again, their ego, especially when you're so far down the line. Someone is heavily invested. For example, someone walking around with a NASA shirt, or they're a big SpaceX or NASA fanboy, and they come to the conclusion that, again, the ego factor is. And I said it many times, ego is the biggest enemy of truth. The ego is the biggest, and that's what causes problems between people. In school, the bullying, every facet of life, the competitiveness on the job. A lot of people are out for themselves. It's all about the ego. So ego is one of the biggest enemies of mankind, and that's how I see it.
Pride, right?
Pride, yes. Even better, even better say pride. But yeah, they all go together. And again, moving forward with all this, with everything we're talking about, I think this is a very productive conversation. Touching upon again, pointing fingers, and we're all being transparent about experiences we've had. Hey, there was a poll on this one YouTube channel, top 10 shills. I made number 1. So, so this is part of it again. When you're involved with this for a certain amount of time. I've been covered on the mainstream. They didn't call me. They didn't use my name. They didn't say Russian Vids, but they used clips from my videos. When they see that, he must be a shill. So that's just part of it. Again, that's just part of it. When you get out there, specifically, was a certain event in Connecticut that was covered in a documentary in Australia and ABC News. They used my audio from a podcast, and then they come to the conclusion that I'm part of it. I'm a shill. So again, the more exposure you get, the more you're out there, the more fingers will be pointed your way as well. So what it comes down to, if you're going to be part of truth, you got to have really thick skin. That's one thing I learned.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you're getting your shill checks, can you tell them to send me mine, because I haven't gotten it yet?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine. Well,
what the hell, man? I mean, for shills, we got to be getting paid.
Yeah, man, that's the funny thing. Wait
a minute. Shilling gets paid? You get paid for being
Don't tell Wayne. Don't tell Wayne.
Yeah, it's like I said. Hey, there's gonna be. They want to control the narrative. Like I said before, many times in the past. Yes, when it comes to, for example, guys like David Icke, when it comes to the CV so-called bug, I'm gonna be careful with how I word it. I don't want to have any issues. He came out saying a good amount of truth, because they want to control both sides. They want to control, of course, the narrative on the mainstream and the alternative, because if you just have people like us speaking the real truth, we can get a good amount of followers. So they have that London Real and David Icke, where he's putting out a good amount of information, but people are falling for the same tricks as well, where he does. For example, David Icke will do 3 or 4 presentations that are spot on, then the 5th is just filled with disinformation. So it's like a big a rat trap type of thing.
Well, again, with him, is it that he's doing it on purpose, or is that just what he thinks? I don't listen to enough of his stuff to really make a decision on that. I mean, he seems like a nice enough fellow, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's certainly known worldwide, but they mess with him a lot too. Like, he can't go to certain places. He's had to cancel shows and things like that, like presentations. But of course, the opposite side will say something like, well, that's to make it appear like he's really a good guy and playing for the right side. So who knows, man? Like, you can't win those arguments unless you've got definitive proof. It is what it is.
I'll say this again. Take the good stuff from David Icke. There's some good stuff, but the disinfo say, I would just say, hey, David Icke is speaking some real good truth here. That's just nonsense. That type of thing. That's where people should go and not be a cheerleader for anybody, really, and just take the good information again. Not to be repetitive, but definitely take the good information and everything else, just throw it to the wayside and be your own person, and don't be, anybody shouldn't be a parrot for any so-called true speaker. And one thing I want to mention, too, going back in time, how, I see things and how I see things now compared to how things used to be. I remember being in school, and you have a teacher and a student going over something that was discussed in class, and the student wants to debate the teacher a little bit about something, and what always happens is they always go back to the textbook, and they say, let's see what the textbook says. Let's refer to the textbook. Then they look at it, they pinpoint what it said here, and that's fact, not to be disputed because it's written in this book. So this is the problem. It hasn't something that's pinpointed in a book, but is it proven in reality? So that's the major issue with society is let's run to the mainstream media for the truth. Let's go to a school textbook for the truth.
Wikipedia.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is, it doesn't matter. Here's the thing is too, if it's mainstream media, alternative media, a Wikipedia, a YouTube video, truth is truth. If it's proven on any platform, it doesn't matter because obviously nobody owns any truth. Obviously, the mainstream media doesn't own it. Nobody owns it. It's for everybody.
Well, there's two things about human psychology that's very, very interesting that I always tell people to keep in mind. One is that they're extremely tribal, and two, a lot of people like to hero worship. So depending upon where you're falling in between those two lines, you see odd behavior come up that if you're trying to be objective, which is what I try to be, I'm sure I fail at times, but I try to be objective about everything, you can see behavior where you're like, that doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. Like Alex Jones, again, is a great example. I used to listen to him all the time. I even met him briefly. I walked up to him and said hello, and he was nice enough. After a while, you just start realizing things, though. This is the big thing, is your discernment should be everything. And, of course, not everybody is as dialed in as others, but you have to be able to look inside, and I don't care what your religious beliefs are, or spiritual beliefs, whatever you want to call them, you should be able to dial into yourself. You should be able to get in touch with your inner thing, and maybe you won't know everything, but, man, if something really stinks on, like, a spiritual level, you should be able to pick up on that,
Yeah. For crying out loud, I used to think Art Bell was dishing it out, man. I mean,
I still listen to Art Bell on occasion. I'll put on an old one because he's from the high desert. I love that voice. He's fantastic. He's the best talk show host who ever existed.
So I used to love that stuff in the 90s, right? And so I thought I was really getting something. But I mean, this is what, again, I'll say is what we've all said, and I put it this way: just eat the meat, throw away the bones. And RV was saying, before Alpha Line, before we started, even the first time, right, about how the larger his channel got, the more trolls he has to deal with, and you got to have a thick skin to do this and to speak your mind. And I had a very wise person, once say that anytime you turn on the light in the darkness, you're going to get some bugs. And I think that's certainly true, that anytime that you put truth out there, you're going to get pushback for it. And so for me, I didn't realize that, I wasn't really doing anything until I started getting thumbs down on my videos. I'm like, hey, I made it. Right now, somebody disagrees, right? So anyway, I'll throw that out there. That, if you turn on a light in the darkness, you're going to get some bugs. That's all.
Yeah, and I had my share of bugs, and I told this story offline about the experiences I've had over the years dealing with trolls. They get vicious. They try to dox you. Get family members, that have nothing to do with truth whatsoever, attacking, innocent people. And one instance I found very creepy was living in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. I received a voice message from an Oakland Alameda police officer, actually sheriff. I'm sorry, it was a sheriff. Saying how he's a big fan, this, and this. He wants to talk to me. I'm like, this is kind of creepy. I didn't give this guy my phone number. He's calling me, leaving me a message, this and this. And what happened was 3 months later, there was this so-called Oakland warehouse fire. I've covered this extensively, where it was just a bunch of nonsense. It wasn't covered in the mainstream media, but there was all these people that supposedly died in this warehouse. And literally, you can get one of these fire hoses, because that's how close a fire station was from this warehouse. Again, not reported by the mainstream media, under 100 yards. And what happened was, to get back to the story about this sheriff from Oakland, Alameda County, he was leaving creepy messages, but I was calling it a hoax. He goes, I could bring you to the morgue and show you the dead bodies. I'll come pick you up. All this crazy stuff. And I actually had to call the police on the police. And I found out he lived in a different, he didn't live in that actual county. He lived one county over, and I had to report him, but this guy would not stop. It was nonstop, and literally I found out it wasn't just some regular bozo. It was actually someone that I actually tracked down on Facebook, and he was posting on their official page and all this stuff. And the guy was following me for a while, but again, what it comes down to is he was obviously given heads up. They're going to have the PSYOP, and they know I cover them all. And basically, he was trying to persuade me, obviously, not to cover it, or who knows what, on the initial phone call 3 months prior to this so-called warehouse fire happening where people died. And yeah, just crazy things like this has happened to me. Just really insane. Of course, with my channel, I've been covered literally on, from ABC Australia, France 24 and events there, Daily Mail in the UK covering the so-called London attacks, New York Mag, a lot of these media outlets, an Orlando radio station about SpaceX. I've had a lot of coverage. So, again, over the years, you just learn to kind of roll with things when you're being attacked. And definitely, you got to have a thick skin for it, because the closer you are to the truth, you're definitely going to be attacked, and heavily at times. And that's the unfortunate thing. And sometimes you got to take a step back and recharge your batteries, lay low a little bit, and you come back. That's what I've done several times too, and that definitely helps.
Well, I know for sure, RV, that I can speak for a lot of people. That we've gotten a lot of good info from you over the years, and I told Rose, and you reminded me of that before we started. That I had told her, when I first started listening to RV, and again, this was like 5-6 years ago. And I was like, man, I thought this guy was nuts. And then I just started looking into what you were saying. I'm like, oh, holy crap, he's right. Good stuff, man. And again, I just say I appreciate your work, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I say, you got a lot of love for you in the community, and keep doing what you're doing, and hang in there for sure.
Thanks, brother. I'll say this really quickly on the subject, not to go on too long, but doing this for so long, first really looking at things deeply when YouTube first started in 2005, and my first channel was 2008. The conclusion I've come to is over the years is not, it didn't happen overnight. That basically, if it's spotlighted, it gets 24/7 coverage. It's their creation. Yeah. And it didn't come to that conclusion overnight. But again, I put my neck out there for a lot of things. The first one to make, video on the O.J. Simpson case, the Rodney King so-called beating. It wasn't even Rodney King himself. And it's a long story with that. But they're basically just like with this George Floyd thing. They're putting these things in motion. And again, it's really, when you're new to this, a lot of people want to sound like credible to your friends, to your sleeping friends. You just harp on things like 9/11 or the moon landing, and everything else is real. Well, it goes much further than that, as we know. So it's a long journey to truth, and it doesn't happen overnight. And that's the thing is, you throw too much at people at once, and they just shut down. And again, you gotta, it's like school. You don't cram. I hate to use this analogy with school, but you don't cram. For example, a first grade to 8th grade, in a 2-hour conversation, 3-hour conversation. It's literally, you got to go to school for this. You got to do so much research, hours upon hours.
It does take time. Yeah.
It takes time, and you definitely, again, you have to have the thirst for the truth. If you're just, you're pushing truth on someone, they're not interested. It's like bouncing a ball against the wall, it just comes right back at you. You got to see someone that's interested. You could plant some seeds, and hopefully, people respond. But some people, they're not intended to get it. They're just not meant to get it, and it's like a broken car. After a certain point, you just got to throw it in the junk heap. It's done, and that's certain people, unfortunately. They're beyond repair.
And this is certainly revealed in the study that I'm doing currently, the Awakening study, where I've been asking people different questions and getting some information from them using some data analysis tools to see that there are some people who are more predisposed to waking up than others, and a statistically significant sample. So, it's been an interesting study. I've been doing this for almost 6 months now. Of taking this stuff with over 350 participants now in this study. And it is interesting that some people are simply just predisposed to they simply want to get external validation, and they're never going to look for the truth. I mean, even again, when I first came across you, RV, and again, I thought some of the stuff was crazy, but I took the time and looked into it myself, right? It was the information, not that you said it or that you didn't say it, right? It was that the information itself stood on its own. And I've said before that, truth does not fear investigation, right, or discovery, but it delights in the spotlight of inquiry. And so if it's true, right, you need to look into it, and it behooves the person to spend their time to do the diligence and look. And that's the only way you're going to come to truth, is to go for it on your own. Nobody's going to get drugged kicking and screaming.
Yeah, and the blinded mind cannot see. That's the thing, is the indoctrinated mind, and the preconceived notion is so strong and certain and so many things. And people, again, the ego, the pride, and there's these people that they think they have a good bearing on things, and you explain things, they look at you sideways, and you can see the anger. And I'll give this real quick story about this this one neighbor I have. He's an engineer, scientist, all these things going for him. I was talking about flat Earth, and I could see, explaining a lot of details about perspective, this, and this. But the bottom line is, well, I was explaining to him, he was getting I could see he was like getting like a little irritated or something by his facial expressions. Then he goes, I know the Earth is not flat. He goes, you know why? Because I'm a scientist. I said, oh, great, you're a scientist, huh? Can you give me the dimensions of this ball Earth that you believe in? Can you give me the radius, the diameter, the circumference, the amount, the speed, of the orbit, how, all these things, how fast the sun. And I said, do you know? And I got down to, do you know the radius of the so-called ball Earth? And he couldn't answer anything, but he was so sure. And that gets to the point of a lot of people, that are, for example, they're very proficient in their job, if they're a computer programmer, whatever they do, but they don't even know the basics of what they're told. But they're so sure about things they don't know the basis of, and that's dangerous to me when you don't know the foundation of things you're not sure of. You're supposedly so sure of, you don't know the very basics. And what it came down to is when I told him the radius was under 4,000 miles, supposed radius of the ball Earth is under 4,000 miles. He goes, that's not true. I said, look it up. I'll bet you $100. He walked away, and to make a long story short, he walked away all upset and angry. The next day, I was in my front yard watering the lawn. He pulls up in front of his house, and he walks up to me, and it was very pleasant, very nice. Flat Earth conversation was brought up. But what happened was, I know he realized, he Googled it, he found out he was wrong. I was right about the so-called radius, the dimensions were given, and he was so cordial to me. And it's like, wow, even though I don't believe the Earth is flat, this is something I didn't know. And this guy basically proved me wrong, and he was very respectful to me. And again, the conversation of flat Earth wasn't brought up, but he was very nice, and it's his way of saying sorry without saying sorry.
Wayne, I'm pulling out the crowbar. Do you want to get in here?
Yeah, I would just say that the important thing we need to realize with all of this, once again, we'll fall back on the same thing. Discernment, okay? Everybody has to have their own discernment. Whenever they're looking at any of this stuff, you have to have your discernment about you to understand what is good information and what's bad information. And here's the thing, okay? Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. So even if there's people out there that are shills or disinfo, they put out some good information sometimes. And I'll go back to the old William Cooper line. Listen to everything, read everything, listen to everyone, but don't believe a bit of it unless you could prove it in your own research. And that is good advice. That is good advice for anybody like looking into any of these type of topics. So, I mean, we could look around. I think we could all agree there's wild inconsistencies in how everything is described to us.
Bingo.
We see trouble at every turn. We've been lied to on a grand scale about just about everything that there is. And when you actually dig back to the foundations of where these things come from, you find out a whole lot of interesting stuff that you never realized before, or even thought about for that matter. Like when you go back to the roots of where our civilization came from, what we know about the modern world, about quote unquote science. That's another thing that really gets me, is everybody, because science, that's their answer. Okay, yeah, science. Did you ever do any science? Did you ever look at any science? Do you understand how scientific method works?
Yeah, do you know what the scientific method is? Right, exactly.
Right. Do you know that the Big Bang Theory is it's a theory, and you know what? It's provably wrong. Like if you actually use real science or scientific method, you could prove that this could not possibly be. It's not repeatable. It's not observable, and it just boggles my mind. But people will always go to because I believe science. Not Not because I watched a video on YouTube, and they like kind of use that as like the to downplay anything that anybody in the truth community has to say, because okay, well, oh, you saw it on YouTube, well, you could go back with the counter argument to them. Well, you saw it on TV, so
yeah, right.
Like,
Again,
what's the worst thing there?
Yeah, right.
They want it both ways.
Denigrate or authenticate the source, right, as being whether or not the material is valid, and that again is the problem with most people. They've been taught to take the authoritative source as legitimate, and if it's a source, again, a crackhead on the street can tell you the truth, right? I mean, they might tell you. In fact, it's often been said that if a man tells you that you're ugly, he's just mean, and if a woman tells you you're ugly, you're jealous. She's jealous. But if a kid tells you you're ugly, you ugly, right? I mean, some people
That's
tell you
great.
the truth, right? And so it doesn't matter the source, right? Even in Scripture, again, even an ass can talk, right? Talk to Balaam. So if a donkey can talk and tell the truth. So again, it takes discernment. That's the point. Is that those in a suit are the most likely to lie to you, and those on the street are most likely to tell you the truth. And yet we have our world turned upside down because we were taught to respect and in fact idolize authority and to model them. And the people who are now in authority, the reason they get there is because basically they're psychopaths. They're willing to do whatever it takes to get power. And that's absolutely not the people that we should be idolizing or emulating, clearly, right? And this is one of the things I love about the person of Jesus, right? It was power under versus power over. He helped and served, and that's why people loved him, because he was there to love them and not to tell them what to do, right? And so this is, again, my point why I try to exist is to share with people love. And this is why I explain to them, if they want to know about spiritual things, I'll tell them what I see, but I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. Who am I to tell anybody how to be? It's nonsense. And so if anybody's telling you with certainty anything, especially of a spiritual nature, I would say, again, absolute certainty is the imminent domain of frauds and fools, right? So again, trust your heart and listen closely to the Creator. It's a still small voice. But if somebody tells you with certainty that they have it as an authoritative source, you can pretty much guarantee that's going to be a lie.
Yeah, one thing I would mention too, we're talking about theories, and this is the funny thing is the mention of, for example, you have gravity, the theory of evolution, you have the string theory, the theory of relativity. These are all theories. I guess if you throw them all together, it becomes a fact. And that's the funny thing is, and it reminds me of this one professor, or I should say scientist, Sylvester Gates. And he said in this one presentation about science, he goes, people have the wrong idea of science. And basically, science is really not about truth. It's about, we're exploring things. It's based on theories. And that's the wrong notion people are getting about science. And I have that clip, and he's a very well-known public speaker as well, talking about science. And that's the problem is, again, the word people, for example, there's one guy that has a video talking about globe versus flat earth. He just keeps saying the word gravity. Because haven't you heard of gravity? Gravity. And he just repeats gravity like 15 times, trying to be funny about it. I'm like, just conjuring up the
gravity's
same word
only
over and over.
A theory.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, again, this is the problem with people is mainstream is they'll just ridicule you. They won't have anything to actually back up what they say. They'll just call you a nut job. Oh, you're crazy. You should be locked up. And those kind of comments. And very rarely will you have a conversation with these people, because what happens is they know they can't have a rational conversation, and all they have is a name calling, because again, they don't have anything else.
Well, that shows insecurity.
It's the last resort of a lost argument.
Yeah,
right?
It shows that they've got nothing to stand on their own. But these people who just want to ride the coattails of others, I mean, what are they doing? They're standing on the shoulders of other people's work. Whether that work is actually accurate or not remains to be seen, but that's all they're doing. They're like, well, the scientists said it, and I have, again, this is scientism. This is what we've talked about so many times. This is a belief system. I'm not saying that all science is wrong, but what I am saying is that people just have this just unshakable belief in things just because someone in a white lab coat said it. And I'm sorry, I'm calling poppycock.
Yeah, well, I look at this simple. Whatever science says, if it can't be demonstrated in the real world, obviously it's not science, and it's that very simple. They must, whatever they say, They must do a scientific demonstration. For example, water sticking to the bottom of a ball, side of a ball. It's never been done. It's just we're told this happens. Here's the thing about not to harp on the flat Earth thing. This is a problem with people, a lot of people in truth can't get on flat Earth because the horrible stigma. I totally understand. I totally get it. It's so uncomfortable to go in that direction because you got to be the biggest idiot in the world if you believe the Earth is flat, and that's done on purpose to keep you away from the truth.
Well, sure. Most of the things that seem the craziest, once I look into them, again, seem like there's meat there, and so they teach you that those things are just so crazy, so impossible. That you should never look there. And I often will tell people, if it seems nutty or if they laugh at you, that's a good reason to start digging.
Well, there's many things. I'll just throw one thing, not to harp again on flat Earth. Just, for example, we can see Venus and we can see Mercury at night, and they're in between the so-called ball Earth and the sun. So how can we see these two so-called planets at night, alongside with Jupiter, when they're basically behind us, close on the side of the sun? There's a lot of things that that science cannot answer for this. They'll make up excuses, but literally this should not happen, cannot happen. And also to seeing the Big Dipper 365 days a year should not happen with the ball Earth on during winter and summer on being on the opposite sides of the sun. With
there are so many problems with the heliocentric model. It falls apart. I mean, again, I thought it was crazy when I first looked into it, and it took about 10 days for me to, finally go, there's so many problems, it just falls apart. And then since then, there's been, many dozens. And Jason, I owe you $10, man. You were right. RV and I wouldn't shut up the whole time. Wayne hasn't said 10 words, man. I'm so sorry.
I apologize too. I'm really bad. David Weiss knows it. If David Weiss hears us, he's gonna be laughing because I go on and on. I apologize. This guy's cut me off. So, hey, RV, shut the hell up. Let us get in. Let's get a word in.
I know what you're like, and I brought you on anyway because I really like you and I respect your work and all that.
It's all good, guys. Don't worry. Jason
guys.
and I belong to a support group. Jason and I belong to a support group for knowing you guys. It's called On and On and On.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
No, I understand. I know that my loquacious and verbose tendencies and propensities precede me. So
forgetting the first rule of
the Club. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump in real quick. Someone's talking about the corrosive effect. Here's the thing is, there's this whole fraud where people are doing these experiments, so-called experiments. They're holding these tubs in Ecuador. They're supposedly on the equator, and they're bringing their tub to one side of the equator, to the opposite side. And you have to pay attention to how they're doing this. It's basically fraudulent when they're on the actual equator. When they're doing this, supposedly the water's still, and they're just dropping like those rose leaves, and it goes straight down. Now, when they're pouring the water, look how they're pouring the water at a certain angle to help that, help the momentum of the drain to go in a certain direction. And also in Australia, it's well known that the toilets, when they flush, they're just positioned differently. And there's a lot of nonsense, or people just...
It's the shape of the bowl and the direction of the water goes into the bowl. It's the only thing that causes it to go down a hole in a vortex in one way or the other. It's the shape of the bowl and the direction and the momentum of the water. That's it. It has nothing to do. There's no motion of the earth. It's been disproven over and over again. Go all the way back to Michelson-Morley. There is no motion. It's never been proven. It can't be proven. It's poppycock. And if people claim Coriolis effect, they have a misapprehension of what that even is. It's an apparent deflection. It's not an actual motion. So sorry. I mean, you got to learn the basics of physics, guys, before you jump in to something like that. So anyway,
you dealt with that big time already with our mutual friend with Rose.
Yeah.
The thing is this, though, guys, and I'm interrupt again, but the thing is this. Again, we're a lot of us. I don't want to say me, but a lot of people are afraid of jumping in this because we feel like, it's going to hurt our credibility, And that's again, everything we're being lied to on such a grand scale. This is the foundation of all lies, and and where there's just this cosmic accident. We're going to need vaccines because we came from this ball from an explosion from nothing, and this is definitely the foundation of all the lies. And the point is they're trying to hide a creator. This Big Bang explosion supposedly created this ball Earth, and again, this is when the foundation's off, everything else after that is off, and this is so key. That's why someone such as myself and David Weiss really harp on this topic.
Well, much like Scripture, I mean, truth is the same way. You can't simply pick and choose what you like and then ignore the rest. If you're going to follow truth, you have to follow it wherever it leads, and you can't simply just go, "I don't like that." In any case, you just can't say, "Well, that's an uncomfortable one for me, so I can't go there because no, you're going to have to follow the truth and be intellectually honest, or you just give up now because then you're again lukewarm. You're hot or cold. So if you're going to go after truth, you got to go after it wherever it leads, no matter what, right? And whatever the consequences. And this means saying that you're wrong, because if you learn something new, that means your previously held beliefs are mistaken, and you have to let go of that, right? So
we have a question here I want to get to before we decide to call it from a super chat. Sold out police plus sold out rioters divided by lost trendy poser protesters equals what? Whomever would like to take that. Well, it's definitely, it sounds like a script. Well, I mean, not with everybody. They're following along with what the script is saying. I think the end goal is control and socialism, to put it in a tight package.
Well, if you're trying to defund the police, understand that something's going to come later.
Something's going to happen.
And so I've said before, if they tell you that, the swamp is clean, and they throw a bunch of 30 or 40 even sort of pedophiles at the top, and you think that these elites are ended and it's going to be a clean sweep, think again, right? Because
are the banks still free? Are the banks free yet? No? Rothschild still own them?
Whatever comes after is orders of magnitude worse. So if they're getting rid of the police, right, this only can mean that there are some local police, as bad as they might be, who don't want to do bad things to people who live near them. So it's easier and more convenient for them to bring somebody from the outside, the UN or Blackwater or whatever private firm, to come in, and they have no compunction about putting a bullet in your head or doing whatever is necessary, right? So local police become a liability. Right, if they want to change things over in a wholesale way, you've got all these sheriffs saying that they won't enforce these lockdown rules or gun grabs. And so, if these guys are being a liability, then we're going to say, the cops are bad. Let's get the cops out of there. And then I'm telling you, whatever comes next is bad. They're not going to let you be the Wild West. They're not going to. Radio Free Capitol Hill here in Seattle is cool and everything. It's 6 blocks where they set aside apart. You can look up Free Capitol Hill. Just Google it. But I'm telling you, whatever comes afterwards is orders of magnitude worse. They are not going to just let it go.
It's order out of chaos for sure. And what they want is federal police basically under like one jurisdiction type of thing, and streamline it all, and basically get rid of the whole local. It's almost like they eliminated local TV stations, and everything is just you have, like, for example, where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, we had KTVU News that was independent. Then it got swallowed up by one of the big ones. I think it was Fox, which one it was. They're all swallowed up, and then what they want to do is basically what it comes down to, when you back it up, it's like 9/11 with new laws being implemented. It's always the order out of chaos. From the chaos of create, when the dust settles, you're going to see new laws implemented. And it becomes norm. Like, you go to the airport, everything they're doing at the airport, it becomes normal normal as usual. And what's going to happen after this, when the dust settles, you're going to see more rights taken away, more restrictions, as they are now. But again, it's just clamping things down and slowly making the slaves more slaves, and basically tighten the grip.
Yep, and getting people to ask for it, because when they create chaos, then people say, come save us.
Dude,
right?
ask. They're going to be begging for it. They're begging for a vaccine. They're going to beg for someone to control the rioting, all of this stuff.
And what happens when they flip off the power and say that the power grid's gone down, right? People they'd sell their soul for 10 minutes of Wi-Fi.
Dude, but wait till the economy starts to tank. It hasn't actually happened yet.
Yeah. They're going to do, and they've been saying clearly that it's going to, and blaming
They've
on
been saying that
everything
for
from, you're not
almost every day in the mainstream news.
Yeah, exactly. They're coming back and saying, well, it's because you didn't save enough, or intense downward pressure. That's a good one. Or the Trump administration, right? They're going to blame everybody, but they're saying it plainly that they're going to crash the dollar.
You know what? I'm going to say this before. I'm going to say this very important. What I noticed throughout history is a lot of these market crashes, stock market crash, the big one in '87. Happen in fall. Things fall in fall. The towers fall. Leaves fall. You know, the stock market falls. So they kind of like this concept of fall, and things fall, things crumble, and definitely I don't like doom and gloom, but maybe look at September, October. If something goes down historically, a lot of times it happens during that time.
Crow points to it all the time. It's like, again, it's not what we believe, it's what they believe, and they certainly are into the sky clock. And so they have times that they want to do things. Again, it doesn't matter what I believe. It doesn't matter whether I'm into it. I know they are. Right, so I can look at their behaviors and say they absolutely follow the times of the sun. And so after summer solstice, whenever it's the strength of the sun, they're going to do some stuff then, and it's going to come to effect, and it's going to materialize and manifest in fall because of fall. And we're going to see some stuff happen. Again, I'm with you, RB, all day long. It's like it's not doom and gloom, but failing to have a plan is planning to fail. Yeah. So you better have a plan in place. What you're gonna do if you can't go get money from the bank, and if they do turn off the power, right? They're gonna force everybody into cities and say we can only provide power in these specific locations, and you can't be out here in the wild. And this is exactly the Agenda 21 and rewilding and all their sustainable garbage. But they're gonna push everybody into cities, and they're gonna make it illegal to be anywhere outside these zones. So when they do that, you better have a plan for what your threshold is and what you're willing to say yes to. Because that won't be good.
Now, wait a second. Let's talk about that for a moment, though. This whole thing, as far as like the economy, quote unquote, that's for us schleps. The bad guys at the top, they don't have to worry about this crap. I mean, even just higher ups in the political structure, we've talked about this so many times with like stuff with the CAFRA and all that. We know they've got investments in the trillions. They don't have to worry about jack shit. It's us that have to deal with the nonsense. This is all manipulation.
Well, over and over, they openly say that the billionaires get richer during downturns because, again, they buy everything at pennies on the dollar when there's depression.
Well, look what they just did with the oil when the beer bug nonsense started.
Sure.
They dropped it into the negatives. Do you think that they didn't pump and dump with that? They knew it was coming. They probably made a gazillion off of. I mean, think about that. When does oil go into the negatives? Yeah. All the oil barons, the Rockefellers and all them, they dumped a while ago. Do you think they didn't just make a stupid amount buying it back?
Absolutely.
Well, here's the thing is, one thing is clear, they're controlling everything from all these psychological operations, the George Floyd, all these big events, they're controlling. And definitely what I'm getting at is they're controlling the stock market, a lot of these falls, it's a lot of these occultic numbers as well. And what it comes down to is they're not concerned about money. They can print all the money. It's about
It's all about the control. That's all it is.
The money means something to mostly to the people that don't have it. That's us. Them, it's just a form of to them it's like monopoly money, and they're controlling everything, and we're fighting for it. Right. And they could just print all they want and
absolutely
control everything. So the way they look at money, the way we look at money is a whole different ballgame. And again, it's more about money. It's about control.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if you're socking away money for a rainy day or whatever, I mean, again, it takes money to live. But if you're hoarding money or food, again, it's the first thing that they're going to take from you, right? Because you're going to need to live. And so when they take power, when they take everything, or when they force you to get a vaccine or whatever it is, all that stuff, man, that's not what you need to rely on. That stuff is going to go away. If you don't have your insides together, none of that stuff is going to mean anything.
Yeah, definitely. And what's to come? The thing is, I always look at it as this. Look, they obviously manipulated our past. They're manipulating our current present time, and the future is being manipulated. And it's all mapped out. And everything's going according to plan. All these events, they're leading us into a certain direction. And definitely, they like the concept idea of literally you got a bank account. All your funds are basically electronic. We could just shut you off on a flip of a switch. And that's what they want. People, the old way, of course, cash is king. people, you have your money under your mattress. If something goes wrong, you have a bunch of money, and that's one thing is they definitely want to have a stranglehold on everybody, and they're narrowing it down, and this is all part of it, definitely.
Yeah, and they've got us self-identifying. They've got the litmus test out to see who's going to wake up and who's not. And, we've all self-identified. So, again, I mean, we know, but we should be aware, right, that we're going to be the first to be set aside.
I'll tell you right now, this is like definitely they do these tests, for example, and I'll say it right now flatly, pun intended, with all these all these so-called virus outbreaks from SARS to N1H1, Ebola, they're all embellished lies, hoaxes, of course. And basically what it comes down to is, you know who the slaves are? They're the ones wearing the mask. The ones wearing the mask, these are the ones that they know. Like, for example, if I'm in a store and I see someone not wearing a mask and I know I can walk up and talk to them about these things, the ones wearing the mask, forget it. They're the ones that are mind controlled. And here's the thing is, the people that are like literally barricading themselves in their homes, like, for example, this one live stream by Flat Earth Fokker, he's in Vancouver, Canada. A bunch of truthers were walking outside of this large apartment complex, and these people were yelling and screaming, and some people were throwing eggs at them, saying, "What are you guys? You guys are responsible for spreading this virus and this and this, and get an education. You guys are morons." And they don't know these people. They're literally mental slaves. They're already emotional mental slaves. Now they're physical slaves, barricading themselves in these apartments over this fake, phony outbreak. Unbelievable.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to talk with Rose 777 on the Poppycock Report in the morning is several reports from the same psychological review, supposedly a study that says that people that don't wear the mask are psychopaths. And yet I can demonstrate that that's absolutely it's just a false report because they couldn't have done it in this period of time, right? To have any statistics, scientifically valid, peer-reviewed report would take a period of time that you could have to either choose prior knowledge or that it's bullshit. And it's bullshit, of course. They're gaslighting you, but they're trying to make you seem as though you're a psychopath. You're a danger to humanity if you don't wear a mask. It's again, it's come to the place where, as you say, RV, it's a visible sign at this point of people who are going to follow along. For the first time the other day, I had somebody at the post office start yelling at me, "You need to wear a mask, Jack." I was like,
Watch
you need
me.
to get a grip. You need to get a grip, son. And my name's not Jack. And he's the first person I've set straight. And, he left before even hitting the counter. He was visibly shaken because I was not putting up with it, right? I didn't even have to yell at him. But my wife says I read like a cop, and I'm like, oh, God, no. But so I'm the farthest thing away from that. But she does say that I do have an authoritative look, and it's like, well, I don't feel that way, but I certainly am not. I'm not a chicken shit. But
I happen to know what you look like, and you're not tiny.
The first time. No, I'm not tiny. But yeah, it was the first time somebody had actually tried to call me out. Beyond that, I've gotten a lot of looks, and people, run away from me out of fear, which has been sad. It's the first time somebody's tried to confront me, and I shut them down. But it is a visible sign of who's following and who's not. And I will note, guys, I may drop at any point. My battery is very low. I had to switch to the iPad and to plug a mic in. Of course, I can't charge it while I'm doing it, so it's pretty low. So if I suddenly disappear, that's why.
A lot of things don't make sense, and I apologize for jumping in again here, but I have a lot to say about this because I've covered this tremendously on my channel. Is what doesn't make sense when you go to, for example, to Walmart. They have all these shopping carts. They have the 6 feet, 6 feet rule, all this stuff. But they have all these shopping carts. They're not where I'm at. They don't clean them. People are just grabbing random carts. They're going to a grocery store. People are touching the same freezer doors, fridge doors, but they want this 6 foot social distancing. Nothing about what's happening, what they're doing, implementing makes sense. And I tell people that are terrified about this, I said, keep your paranoia to yourself. This is ridiculous. All these so-called celebrities have it. How many have died? Tom Hanks, you have two princes. You have Prince Albert, Prince Charles, all these celebrities, MVP from the NBA. And literally no one we know is dying. And it's always, I know a friend of a friend,
right,
type of thing. And it's always, on social media, you hear about it. But literally, of course, anybody's checked in a hospital, it's going to be labeled a corona, a COVID-19, and that's the stamp that's going to be put on these people. So if you feel a little, for example, here's the thing too: if you have a little the sniffs, you have a little cough. Oh, I must have corona. Everybody's so paranoid. So I have a friend that has corona because he has the sniffles now. So it must be corona. That's what's going on. That's what's going around. The big thing is fear, and fear, obviously, and that gets back to a very famous former CIA officer, John R. Stockwell, and he says the whole function of the CIA is to keep the world unstable, propagandize the public with fear and hate, and the fear is the corona, and the hate is the divide and conquer. Right
I can
now,
totally accept that as being what's really going on. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like they're telling us. They literally tell us what's going to happen before it happens. And that reminds me also of the one UK Secretary of State, Dennis Healy, when he stated years ago, back in the 70s, how he stated world events don't happen by accident. You know, these things are pulled off by those that hold the purse strings, you know. And they literally tell us, and you show these quotes to people, and they'll just like, oh, it's just a coincidence. I call them coincidence theorists, you know. But everything that's happening, it's just, you know, and all the predictive programming as well with The Simpsons and The Family Guy with so many things, and everything's just a coincidence to these people. And again, some people you gotta plant seeds, but at a certain point you just gotta walk away. So you know what, these people are just completely programmed, and it's like a CD-ROM. You know, once it's pressed, it's done. You know, with these people.
All right. Well, Baldini's thing died. What did he say? It was his
Yeah,
iPad.
I got to run it. It's at 1%, so I'm going to run now. Love you guys. Take care, and thanks everybody for showing up. I'll be recharged again for Poppycock Report with Rose in the morning. Take care, guys.
Cool.
Take care.
Good night, Baldini.
Good talking to you, RV. Hey, take care,
man.
Wayne. We'll talk again soon, man.
Well, I guess
All right,
we can
Baldy, have a good
wrap
one.
her up. Russian Vids, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and any last words you want to throw in before we sign off?
Yes, thanks so much, Jason. Yeah, you know, my newest channel is RV Truth. It's about, I don't know, maybe a month and a half old now. Yeah, you know, just covering a lot of the topics that are sensitive on live streams. It seems those go more smoothly. Not today, for example, but yeah. But on my channel, usually the sensitive topics I cover on live streams, the videos that I put out, you know, on SpaceX and a lot of the occultic stuff are just standard videos. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I just you know, just keep rolling, moving forward. And here's the big thing is I do not let anybody out there, and I hate to say it, even my subscribers, influence what I put out. I'm going to put out what I'm going to put out. A lot of times over the years, I put out things that a lot of subs do not agree with, but they find out later on, yeah, you know, RV, and I hate to say it, was right. I'm human. I make mistakes too. But when I see things for what it is, I'm not afraid to say it. But again, it has to be not something pulled out of thin air. It has to be something concrete and proven through research. And thanks so much again, Jason, for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, brother, and you're certainly welcome back if you're interested.
Thank you.
And Wayne, what you going to tell us before we say bye-bye?
Boy, we ran the gamut of everything tonight. We discussed everything from, you know, wizards and warlocks and, you know, the infighting in the truth community and even the direction that toilets flush. So, I mean, I don't think there's a bit of information we really didn't touch on at some point here. But, yeah, just the important thing for the takeaway tonight, guys, trying to get back to what the topic was, is just use your discernment. I mean, it doesn't hurt to listen to somebody, even if they may be a shill. Hear what they have to say. Look into it yourself. If you really think it might be something that's legitimate, look into it. And, you know, let your discernment be your guide, and you could tell the truth from what may be disinformation or something just through a little bit of research. Put the work in, and you can know some things. And I think it's important that we know some things. So that's kind of where we're at. And, you know, all of us here could agree we've been lied to on a colossal scale, and we're all just looking to find out what's true and what's not. And, you know, screw the infighting among the truth community. There's no need for that. We could disagree on things and still be friends. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
let's
Wayne.
just keep moving it forward.
Well stated, Wayne. I'll say this too. One last thing. I apologize. Is when it comes to information, it's like eating a meal. It takes time to accept. You got to let it process, absorb some bad stigmas of truth. Like I said, flat Earth and a lot of things, and you got to give it time and forget. You got to do a reset when it comes to truth. And that's so very important, and that's what keeps people locked in a box is the horrible stigmas put on a lot of truth.
That's true, and you have to learn how to unlearn things too.
Yes.
And that's not something that's easy to come upon, because when you've been indoctrinated for so long, that's just how your thought process is. You have to really change how your thought process works and think back. Hey, is this really the original intent of such and such information? And it's a process. It takes time, and it's not something people come to overnight. But I do see some hope out there, because there are a lot more people paying more attention to things now than they ever have before, with all this nonsense going on in society. So there's people waking up to a lot of these untruths left and right. So that offers us some hope. So
one last
see
thing,
we could have a positive direction here from all of it.
Well, one thing I'll jump in. Last thing, I apologize, Jason. I'll keep going on and on. One thing I always try to do, thank you, is try to really, we're all human. We all make mistakes. But I'd really try to limit the bad information, because, for example, you could be a tremendous truth speaker, and one thing off, they're going to just grab that and run with it. And they say, oh, see, he was wrong about that. Then it discredits supposedly everything else. So we're really under a microscope. See, these people in science, they can be wrong about everything. Oh, we found out we're wrong about this. This is how it actually is. They get no grief whatsoever. But as truth speakers, we are under a microscope, and they are desperate to discredit us. So we have to be so very careful of what we put out. And one thing is like staying away from prediction on exact dates, and then it's wrong. Then we look like kooks. So we have to be careful the way we present ourselves. It's so very important.
No, I'm totally with you, dude. You're right. It's hard, because what are we doing really? We're collecting information, and we're just trying to speculate to the best of our ability, and we're all fallible. We're all human. No one is perfect. We just do the best we can. But all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Much love to everyone who was here tonight. Thank you so much for sticking it out with our third time that seemed to work out, thankfully. Tomorrow on Crow 777 Radio, we are releasing an episode with Sayer G. He is considered a health guru, and we had a great chat. So there it is, everybody. I hope you have a great night, and we will see you soon.
Take care, everyone.
angel. The universe to see. Line of light, I might believe in heaven. I sign the times and ask you to stay. That's the living story. Take my hand and let's fly away. Manifest. Yes, I'd be an angel. The universe will speak. Manifest. Yes, I'd be an angel for all to see. Manifest inside me, an angel. The universe will speak. Manifest inside me, an angel for all to see. Manifest inside me, my angel. The universe will speak. Manifest inside me, my angel for all to see.